Captain Zekthar stared at the empty viewport of his ship. The planet below should have been busy with lights and movement. Instead, it looked like a dead rock floating in space. This was the third human world his team had found in the same state. "Run another scan," he told his science officer. "There has to be something we missed." The blue-skinned Altarian at the science station shook her head. "Captain, the readings are the same. No life signs, no energy sources, no radio signals, nothing." Zekthar's four eyes narrowed as he studied the data. The Galactic Empire had lost contact with the humans 6 months ago. At first, nobody was worried. Humans were known for being difficult and independent. They often went quiet for weeks at a time, working on their strange projects. But 6 months was too long. Even for humans. "Take us down to the surface," Zekthar ordered. "I want to see this with my own eyes." The ship descended through the planet's atmosphere. As they got closer, the crew could see the human cities spread out below them. Tall buildings reached toward the sky. Roads connected different areas in neat patterns. Everything looked normal from above, but there were no vehicles moving on the roads. No lights in the windows. No signs of life anywhere. They landed in what used to be the main spaceport. The landing pad was clean and empty. Their ship's sensors showed that the air was safe to breathe. Zekthar led a small team outside. The silence was the worst part. Human cities were always noisy. Humans made noise wherever they went. They played music, talked loudly, and built machines that hummed and buzzed. This city felt like a tomb. "Look at this," called out Dr. Namira, the team's archaeologist. She was standing next to a large stone monument in the center of the spaceport. "There's writing here." Zekthar walked over to examine the monument. Fresh carvings had been cut into the old stone. The words were written in basic Galactic, the language all species used to talk to each other. "They are coming," the message read. "We tried to stop them. We failed. Evacuate this sector. Warn the galaxy. Run for your lives." Below that, in smaller letters, was another line. "We're sorry." "This doesn't make sense," said Lieutenant Voss, the security chief. "Humans don't run from fights. They're the ones who charge into battle when everyone else retreats." Zekthar had to agree. In all his years serving in the Imperial fleet, he had never seen humans back down from anything. They were stubborn to a fault. When the Empire first met them, humans were still fighting wars with primitive weapons. But they never gave up even when facing impossible odds. "Captain," Dr. Namira called from across the plaza, "you need to see this." She had found an information terminal that was still working. A message played on repeat, showing a tired-looking human woman in a military uniform. "This is General Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Force," the recording said. "If you're receiving this message, then you've entered the evacuation zone. Do not investigate our abandoned worlds. Do not try to contact us. Do not send rescue missions. There is something in the void between galaxies that feeds on intelligent life. We awakened it by accident. We tried to fight it. We failed. The only way to save the galaxy is to run. Take your people and go as far away as possible. Do not come looking for us. We are already gone." The message repeated 3 more times, then started over. "Sir," the communications officer spoke through the radio. "I'm picking up similar broadcasts from automated stations throughout the system." All saying the same thing. Zekthar felt a chill run down his spine. He had known humans for over 20 years. They were brave, sometimes to the point of being stupid. They never talked about running away. If humans were telling the galaxy to evacuate, then something was very, very wrong. "What could make an entire species disappear?" Lieutenant Voss asked. "I don't know," Zekthar admitted, "but I intend to find out." They spent the next 3 hours exploring the city. They found homes with meals still on the tables. Vehicles parked in neat rows with fuel in their tanks and keys in the ignition. Shops with goods still on the shelves. Everything looked like the people had just vanished one day. But there were no bodies. No signs of violence. No damage to the buildings. It was as if every human on the planet had simply decided to leave at the same time. "Captain, look at this," Dr. Namira said. She had found a library and was reading through the computer files. According to these records, the evacuation was planned. They had been preparing for months. Preparing for what? I'm not sure. But there are references to something called Project Sanctuary. And there are mentions of emergency protocols for something they call the Devourers. Zekthar studied the files over her shoulder. Most of the important data had been deleted or encrypted, but what remained painted a picture of a species preparing for the worst possible outcome. They were scared, he realized. Really scared. "Sir," the communications officer called again. "I'm receiving a priority message from command. 3 more survey teams have found abandoned human worlds, all with the same warnings." Zekathar looked around the empty city one more time. Somewhere out there, humans were hiding. But from what? And why were they so desperate for the galaxy to stay away? As they prepared to leave the planet, Dr. Namira made one more discovery. Hidden in the basement of a government building, she found a room full of star charts. Red marks covered dozens of systems in the outer rim. Each mark was labeled with a date and the word "lost." At the center of the charts was a region of space that had been colored completely black. Someone had written across it in large letters, "Do not enter, they are there." "Captain," Dr. Namira said quietly, "whatever the humans found out there, it was enough to make them abandon everything they had built. Their homes, their worlds, their entire civilization." Zekathar nodded grimly. "Then we need to find out what it was. The Empire needs to know what we're dealing with." But as their ship lifted off from the silent world, Zekathar couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Something in the darkness between the stars was waiting, and the humans had been trying to protect them from it. The question was, protect them from what? As they jumped to hyperspace, heading for the next abandoned human world, none of them noticed the small probe that detached from their ship's hull. It drifted slowly toward the planet's surface, its sensors active and recording. Somewhere in the depths of space, something ancient and hungry received the signal. The hunt was about to begin. 3 weeks later, Captain Zekathar stood in the ruins of what used to be humanity's greatest research station. The facility was built inside a massive asteroid, hidden in the outer rim of human space. His team had found it by following clues from the abandoned worlds. "This place is huge," said Dr. Namira as they walked through corridors carved from solid rock. "It must have taken decades to build." The station was different from the empty cities they had explored before. Here there were clear signs of a struggle. Blast marks scarred the walls. Emergency bulkheads had been sealed shut. Some sections of the station were completely destroyed. "Whatever happened here," Lieutenant Voss observed, "the humans fought back." They made their way to the central command center. Banks of computers lined the walls, most of them still functioning. The main view screen showed a star map of the galaxy, with thousands of red dots marking different locations. "Look at this," Dr. Namira said, accessing one of the computer terminals. They were tracking something that was moving through space. The data showed a pattern of disappearances across multiple star systems. First, long-range scouts would stop reporting. Then exploration ships would vanish. Finally, entire colonies would go silent. The pattern had been spreading inward toward the galactic core for over 2 years. The humans were fighting some kind of invasion, Zekathar realized. But invasion by what? Dr. Namira pulled up more files. Security footage showed human scientists working frantically in laboratories. They were studying samples of some kind of black material that seemed to move on its own. "Play that again," Zekathar ordered. In the video, a scientist in a protective suit was examining a small piece of the dark substance. As they watched, the material suddenly expanded, covering the scientist's hand. The person tried to pull away, but the darkness spread up their arm. Other scientists rushed to help, but the affected person began to change. Their body stretched and twisted into shapes that shouldn't have been possible. Their face became something else entirely, something with too many eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. The transformed scientists turned on their colleagues, moving faster than anything human should be able to move. The video cut to static. "Dear gods," Lieutenant Voss whispered. "What was that thing?" Dr. Namira's hands shook as she accessed more files. According to these reports, the humans called them devourers. They're some kind of parasitic entity that can take over living beings and change them. More videos showed human military forces fighting against creatures that defied description. Some looked like giant insects made of shadow. Others appeared to be masses of writhing tentacles with glowing eyes. All of them moved in ways that hurt to watch. But the most disturbing thing was how they seemed to learn. Early videos showed the creatures attacking in simple, direct ways. Later footage revealed them using tactics, weapons, and even captured human technology. "They're intelligent," Zekathar said, "and they adapt quickly." "There's more," Dr. Namira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The humans figured out where they came from." She pulled up a series of deep space sensor readings. The data showed an area of space between galaxies where nothing should exist, but the sensors detected something massive moving in that emptiness. something that was heading toward the Milky Way. The humans called it the Swarm. Dr. Namira read from the report. A collective intelligence that travels between galaxies, consuming all life it encounters. According to their estimates, it had already destroyed at least 12 other galaxies. The report continued with more terrifying details. The swarm didn't just kill its victims. It absorbed their knowledge, their memories, their very essence. Each species it consumed made it smarter and more dangerous. The humans discovered it by accident, Dr. Namira explained. They were testing a new type of faster-than-light communication device. The signal reached too far and attracted the swarm's attention. Zekthar felt sick. The humans had been trying to advance their technology and had accidentally doomed the entire galaxy. How long ago was this? He asked. According to the timestamps, about 3 years ago. The first Devourer scouts arrived 6 months later. They found more evidence in the station's military wing. Human soldiers had been working on new weapons designed to fight the Devourers, energy weapons that could disrupt their molecular structure, kinetic rounds made from materials that the creatures couldn't absorb, even experimental bombs that could tear holes in space itself. But none of it had been enough. "Look at these casualty reports," Lieutenant Voss said, reading from a military terminal. The humans lost entire fleets. Billions of people died fighting these things. The final battle reports made for grim reading. Human forces had managed to slow the swarm's advance, but they couldn't stop it. For every devourer they destroyed, 10 more took its place. For every world they saved, 3 more fell to the darkness. In the deepest part of the station, they found the research lab where everything had started. The faster-than-light communication device sat in the center of the room, surrounded by blast shields and warning signs. Even now, 3 years later, the machine hummed with power. They never shut it down, Dr. Namira observed. Why would they leave it running? Zekthar studied the device carefully. Something about it bothered him, but he couldn't figure out what. "Captain," the communications officer called from the ship, "I'm detecting strange energy readings from your location. Whatever you're looking at, it's putting out some kind of signal." That's when Zekthar understood. The machine wasn't just a communication device anymore. It had become a beacon, constantly sending signals into the void between galaxies. The humans had left it running on purpose. They're using it as bait, he realized, drawing the swarm toward human space and away from the rest of the galaxy. But that meant the humans were still fighting. They hadn't given up or run away. They were sacrificing themselves to buy time for everyone else. Dr. Namira found the final piece of the puzzle in the station commander's personal log. Admiral Marcus Webb, the human in charge of the facility, had recorded his last message just before the evacuation. "We can't win this fight," the recorded admiral said. "The swarm is too big, too powerful, too smart. But we can buy the galaxy sometime. We're going to make them think they've won, make them focus all their attention on hunting down the last humans. While they're busy with us, maybe the other species can prepare. Maybe they can find a way to escape." The recording paused as explosions echoed in the background. "We're evacuating all our people to hidden bases in other dimensions. The Devourers can't follow us there, at least not yet. But we're leaving behind a trail for them to follow, making them think we're running scared. The truth is we're leading them into a trap. More explosions, closer this time. If anyone finds this message, remember what we tried to do. Remember that we died fighting for something bigger than ourselves. And whatever you do, don't try to rescue us. The trap only works if everyone thinks we're gone." The recording ended as the station's emergency lights activated. Zekthar looked around the abandoned facility with new understanding. The humans hadn't fled in panic. They had made the hardest choice possible, sacrificed their entire civilization to save everyone else. "We need to leave," he said quietly. "Now." As their ship departed the research station, none of them spoke about what they had learned. The truth was too terrible, too overwhelming to discuss. But in the depths of space, something had noticed their visit. Ancient eyes turned toward the fleeing ship, and across the galaxy the hunt intensified. The human sacrifice was about to be tested. Captain Zekthar's ship had been searching human space for 2 months now. Each world they visited told the same story: rapid evacuation, cryptic warnings, and traces of technology that didn't make sense. But it was on the former human homeworld of Earth that they found the real answers. Earth was different from the other abandoned worlds. The cities weren't just empty. They had been carefully prepared. Buildings had been stripped of anything valuable. Critical infrastructure had been dismantled with surgical precision. Even the orbital stations had been moved or destroyed. They didn't just leave, Dr. Namira observed as they surveyed the planet from orbit. They erased themselves, but not completely. In the ruins of what used to be the Global Defense Command, they found a massive underground facility that had been left intact. It took them 3 days to break through the security systems, but what they discovered inside changed everything. The facility was a data archive, the complete history of humanity's final years. Thousands of computer cores held detailed records of their war against the swarm, their evacuation plans, and their ultimate strategy for survival. My God, Dr. Namira whispered as she accessed the main database. They documented everything. The records painted a picture of a species pushed to the edge of extinction, fighting not just for their own survival, but for the survival of all intelligent life in the galaxy. The humans had learned that the swarm was older than anyone imagined, a cosmic predator that had been consuming galaxies for millions of years. "Look at this," Lieutenant Voss said, pointing to a holographic display. They found evidence of the swarm's previous hunts. The display showed images of dead galaxies, star systems stripped of all life, planets reduced to empty rocks, entire civilizations wiped from existence. The swarm moved slowly but thoroughly, taking centuries to completely devour each galaxy before moving on to the next. But the humans found something else. Dr. Namira continued reading. The swarm has a weakness. It can only exist fully in normal space. Pocket dimensions and alternate realities are difficult for it to access. That's when they discovered the real scope of humanity's plan. Project Sanctuary wasn't just an evacuation. It was the largest engineering project in galactic history. The humans had been secretly building hidden bases in pocket dimensions, creating entire alternate realities where their people could survive. They moved their entire civilization, Zekthar said in amazement. All 12 billion humans, plus their technology, their culture, everything. They hid it all in spaces that the swarm can't reach. But the evacuation was only the first part of the plan. The second part was far more dangerous. Dr. Namira found files labeled Operation Mousetrap that detailed humanity's final gambit. They were going to fake their own extinction while secretly preparing the ultimate trap for the swarm. They left behind a network of quantum resonance devices, she explained, studying the technical specifications. Thousands of them, hidden throughout their former territory. Each one looks like normal human technology, but they're actually components of a massive space-time manipulation array. Lieutenant Voss frowned as he tried to understand the physics. What kind of manipulation? Dimensional collapse, Dr. Namira said quietly. They're going to trap the swarm in a pocket of space-time that can be sealed off from the rest of the universe. The plan was incredibly complex and required perfect timing. The humans had to make the swarm believe that they were winning, that humanity was truly extinct. Meanwhile, the hidden quantum devices would slowly charge up over several years, drawing power from the swarm's own energy signature. When enough devourers entered human space to investigate the extinct civilization, the humans would trigger the trap. The quantum resonance devices would create a localized collapse of space-time, sealing the swarm into a dimensional prison from which they could never escape. But there's a problem, Dr. Namira continued reading. The trap can only be triggered from the outside. Someone has to stay behind to activate it manually. Zekthar felt a chill as he understood what that meant. The humans who stayed behind to operate the trap would be trapped along with the swarm. They would die to save the galaxy. How many? He asked. According to these records, about 50,000 volunteers. Scientists, military personnel, engineers. All the people needed to maintain the quantum devices and execute the final phase. They found personal messages from some of the volunteers. Dr. Sarah Chen, the same woman from the warning broadcasts, had recorded a goodbye message to her family. I know this isn't fair, she said in the recording. I know you wanted me to come with you to the sanctuary dimensions, but someone has to stay behind to make sure the trap works. Someone has to be here to push the button when the time comes. She paused, wiping tears from her eyes. We're not dying for nothing. We're dying so that every other species in the galaxy has a chance to live, so that our children, hidden in the sanctuary worlds, can someday return to a universe free of the swarm. Other messages told similar stories. Parents saying goodbye to children they would never see again. Scientists accepting that their life's work would end in sacrifice. Soldiers volunteering for one final mission with no chance of survival. The humans are still out there, Zekthar realized. Both the ones in hiding and the ones maintaining the trap. Dr. Namira nodded. According to these records, the trap is almost ready. It just needs the swarm to take the bait and enter human space in sufficient numbers. But then Lieutenant Voss made a disturbing discovery. He had been analyzing the energy readings from their ship's sensors and comparing them to the data in the human archives. "Captain," he said urgently, "our presence here is activating something. The quantum devices are responding to our life signs." Zekthar checked the readings himself. Their ship's biological sensors were indeed triggering responses from hidden devices throughout the solar system. The machines thought they were detecting surviving humans. "We need to leave," he ordered. "Now." But as they prepared to depart Earth's solar system, Dr. Namira made one final discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the deepest levels of the archive was a message marked, "For Galactic Empire personnel only." The message was from Admiral Webb, the same human who had commanded the research station. But this recording was different, newer, made just weeks ago. "If you're reading this," the Admiral said, "then you've found our archives and you understand what we're trying to do. You also probably realize that your investigation is compromising the trap." Zekthar felt his blood run cold. The quantum devices are designed to respond to intelligent life. Every time someone enters our former territory, they think the evacuation failed. They think there are still humans to be found, and they start calling to the swarm. The recording showed star charts with new red markers, locations where Galactic Empire ships had visited in the past 3 months. "You've been leaving a trail," Admiral Webb continued. "Every abandoned world you've investigated, every facility you've explored, every scan you've run, it's all been recorded by our automated systems, and those systems have been broadcasting the data to the swarm." Zekthar realized with growing horror that their investigation had been turned against them. The humans' own security systems were betraying their locations to the enemy. "The swarm knows you're here now," the Admiral's message concluded. "They're coming for you, and they're coming fast. You have maybe 6 hours before the first scouts arrive. After that, you'll lead them straight to your homeworlds." The message ended with coordinates, the location of a secret, human facility where they might find help. "But be warned," the Admiral's final words echoed in the empty chamber. "Coming to us means accepting the truth. It means joining our fight, and it means you might never see your homes again." As alarms began blaring throughout their ship, Zekthar made the hardest decision of his life. He could try to run back to Empire space and warn his people, but the swarm would follow and billions would die, or he could trust the humans and hope their desperate plan could still work. "Set course for those coordinates," he ordered. "Maximum speed." Behind them, reality began to twist as something vast and hungry stirred in the darkness between stars. The trap was about to be tested, and the galaxy's fate hung in the balance. The coordinates led them to what looked like an empty patch of space on the edge of human territory. Zekthar's ship arrived just as their sensors began detecting something impossible. Reality itself was starting to break down. "Captain," his science officer reported with fear in her voice, "I'm reading massive space-time distortions throughout this sector. Whatever's happening, it's affecting the basic laws of physics." Through the viewport, they could see stars flickering like dying candles. Some appeared to be moving in ways that made no sense, while others seemed to exist in multiple locations at once. Space itself looked wrong, twisted into shapes that hurt to look at. "There!" Dr. Namira pointed to a region where space appeared completely black. "Something's there, but our sensors can't read it." As they watched, the darkness began to move. It flowed like liquid, reaching out with tendrils that stretched across light years in seconds. And within that darkness, they could see shapes, massive forms that defied description. "The swarm," Lieutenant Voss whispered. "They're here." But then something unexpected happened. A voice crackled over their communications system. A human voice. "Galactic Empire vessel, this is Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Resistance. Cut your engines and prepare to be brought aboard. You're about to witness something that most people pray they never have to see." Before Zekthar could respond, their ship was caught in some kind of tractor beam. But this wasn't ordinary technology. The beam seemed to fold space around them, pulling them toward a location that their sensors insisted was empty. Suddenly, they were inside a massive space station that hadn't been there moments before. The hangar bay was filled with human ships, vessels that incorporated technology Zekthar had never seen before. Some appeared to be partially transparent, as if they existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Welcome to Sanctuary Base Alpha," Commander Chen said as she met them at the airlock. She looked older than in her recorded messages, with lines of stress and exhaustion marking her face. "I'm sorry you had to see this, but you forced our hand." "You're supposed to be dead," Zekthar said, still trying to process what he was seeing. "We are dead in a way," Chen replied. "We exist between dimensions now in spaces that the swarm has trouble reaching. But we're still fighting." She led them through corridors that seemed to stretch further than the station's exterior dimensions should have allowed. The walls were covered with displays showing the battle taking place outside, if it could be called a battle. The Devourers weren't just attacking in the traditional sense. They were unmaking reality itself, turning entire star systems into twisted reflections of themselves. Planets became masses of writhing flesh. Stars turned into eyes that watched everything with malevolent intelligence. "This is what the swarm really is," Chen explained. "Not just a collection of creatures, but a fundamental force that opposes existence itself. It doesn't just consume life. It consumes the very concept of life." They reached the station's command center where dozens of humans worked frantically at control stations. But these weren't quite the same humans Zekthar remembered. They seemed slightly translucent, as if they weren't entirely present in normal space. "The dimensional shift affects our physical forms," Chen noticed his stare. "We're slowly becoming something else. Something that can exist in the spaces between realities. It's the only way to fight the swarm effectively." Admiral Webb was there, coordinating the defense. He looked up as they entered, his eyes reflecting depths that seemed to go on forever. "You came," he said simply. "I wasn't sure you would. What's happening out there?" Zekthar asked, gesturing toward the displays showing the cosmic horror unfolding around them. "The trap is working, but not as planned," Webb admitted. "We expected the swarm to send scouts first, then gradually commit more forces. Instead, your investigation triggered their full attention. They're bringing everything they have." The displays showed the true scope of the threat. The swarm wasn't just a collection of ships or creatures. It was a living galaxy, a massive organism composed of billions of devourers working as a single mind. And it was pouring through dimensional rifts into their universe. "The quantum resonance devices are charging faster than expected," Chen reported, "but we need more time. At this rate, the swarm will overwhelm our defenses before we can complete the dimensional prison." "How long do you need?" Zekthar asked. 12 hours minimum," Webb replied. "Maybe 18 if we're lucky." Outside, the battle was unlike anything Zekthar had ever imagined. Human ships that existed partially in other dimensions attacked Devourers with weapons that tore holes in space itself. The swarm responded by turning reality into a weapon, creating zones where the laws of physics simply stopped working. "Your people need to evacuate," Chen said urgently. "We've been monitoring Galactic Empire communications. The swarm is already spreading beyond human space. They're following the trail your investigation ships left behind." Dr. Namira looked horrified. "How many ships?" "All of them," Webb said grimly. "Every vessel that entered human territory in the past 3 months has been tracked. The swarm knows the location of your major colonies, your homeworlds, everything." Zekthar felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. Their investigation had doomed the Empire just as surely as the humans' original communication experiment had doomed the galaxy. "There might be a way," Chen said, studying tactical displays. "Our dimensional technology works both ways. We can create evacuation portals, but only for a limited time and only to specific locations." She showed them a star chart marked with potential evacuation routes. The safe zones were few and far between, mostly empty systems in distant parts of the galaxy where the swarm hadn't yet detected intelligent life. "But there's a catch," Webb added. "Opening those portals will drain power from our quantum devices. It might delay the trap long enough for more of the swarm to escape." Zekthar stared at the tactical displays, watching as the swarm spread across the galaxy like a cancer. Every minute they delayed meant more worlds falling to the darkness. "How many can you evacuate?" he asked. "Maybe 1 billion people," Chen calculated, "if we focus on the core worlds and ignore the outer colonies." "That's not enough," Lieutenant Voss said. "The Empire has over 300 billion citizens." "Then we make a choice," Webb said quietly. "Save what we can or lose everything trying to save everyone." Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The displays showed something terrifying. The swarm had found them. Massive devourer forms were pressing against the dimensional barriers protecting the station. Their touch caused reality to crack and bleed, creating rifts that showed glimpses of the nightmare dimensions where the swarm truly lived. "They're trying to force their way in," a human technician reported. "Dimensional shields at 60% and falling. How long until they break through?" Chen asked. "Maybe an hour," came the reply. Webb turned to Zekthar with eyes that held the weight of entire worlds. "We need you to make a choice, Captain. Help us coordinate the evacuation and save what you can of your people, or try to run back to Empire space and warn them, knowing that the swarm will follow you home." Through the station's viewports, they could see reality continuing to unravel. Stars were dying. Space was folding in on itself, and the darkness between galaxies was pouring through the cracks. "There's a third option," Zekthar said suddenly. "What if we don't wait for the trap to charge completely? What if we trigger it now, while the swarm is focused on breaking through your defenses?" Webb shook his head. "Partial activation won't create a strong enough prison. Some of the swarm would escape and they'd be immune to future attempts. But it might disrupt them enough to give the galaxy time to prepare," Dr. Namira suggested. "Maybe the other species could evacuate to different galaxies. Or maybe it would just make them angry," Chen countered. "A wounded swarm might be even more dangerous than a healthy one." As the dimensional shields continued to weaken, Zekthar realized that there were no good choices left. Everything they did from this point forward would involve sacrifice on an unimaginable scale. The only question was, what were they willing to sacrifice to give the galaxy a chance at survival? Outside, the swarm pressed closer, and reality screamed as it began to tear. The decision came down to a single moment. As the swarm pressed against the dimensional shields of Sanctuary Base Alpha, Captain Zekthar made the choice that would save or doom the galaxy. "We evacuate," he said firmly. "Every ship, every person we can reach. And we trust that humanity's trap will work." Admiral Webb nodded grimly. "Then we'd better move fast. Opening evacuation portals will accelerate the shield collapse." What followed was the most desperate rescue operation in galactic history. Human ships that existed between dimensions opened portals throughout Empire space, appearing in major systems with warnings that defied belief. "This is Commander Chen of the Human Resistance," the broadcasts began. "Your galaxy is under attack by a force that feeds on intelligent life. You have 6 hours to evacuate your core worlds before they fall to the swarm." At first, most species didn't believe the warnings. The humans were supposed to be extinct. The idea of a threat that could consume entire galaxies seemed impossible. But as reports came in from the outer rim, worlds going silent, reality itself breaking down, panic began to spread. Zekthar coordinated the evacuation from Sanctuary Base Alpha, working alongside humans who flickered in and out of normal space as the dimensional technology strained their physical forms. The scale of the operation was overwhelming. "We've got 300 Imperial fleets requesting evacuation routes," Dr. Namira reported, "and that's just from the first wave of worlds." "Route them through Portal 7, Chen ordered. "It leads to the Andromeda Galaxy. They'll be safe there until we can figure out a more permanent solution." But opening the portals was draining power from the quantum resonance devices at a dangerous rate. Each evacuation ship that passed through weakened humanity's trap. "Dimensional shields down to 30%, a technician reported. "The swarm is starting to break through." Through the viewports, they could see nightmare shapes pressing against the barriers. The devourers had grown larger and more complex, incorporating matter and energy from consumed worlds into their bodies. Some were the size of small moons covered with eyes and mouths that spoke in the voices of their victims. "Admiral," a human officer called urgently, "we're receiving a transmission from Sanctuary Base Beta. They've made contact with survivors from other galaxies." The message that came through changed everything. It was from a species called the Architects, ancient beings who had fled their home galaxy millions of years ago when the swarm first appeared. "We know what you're attempting," the Architects' message said. "We tried the same thing long ago. Dimensional prisons can work, but only if the entire swarm is trapped simultaneously. Any part that escapes will eventually find a way to free the rest." The Architect's message included data that made Admiral Webb's face go pale. "They're right," he said quietly. "Our trap won't hold unless we get all of them." "How much of the swarm is here?" Zekthar asked. "About 60%, Webb admitted. The rest is still in the void between galaxies. If we trigger the trap now, those forces will survive to attack again later. But they were running out of time. The evacuation had removed nearly 1 billion people from the danger zone, but that was barely a fraction of the Empire's population, and the swarm was beginning to break through into normal space. "There is another way," Commander Chen said suddenly. She had been studying data from the architects. "We don't trap the swarm, we lead them away." "Away where?" Webb asked. "Everywhere," Chen replied. "The architects have been running for millions of years, staying one step ahead of the swarm. They've learned to scatter across multiple galaxies, never staying in one place long enough to be completely consumed." The plan was audacious beyond belief. Instead of trying to save their current galaxy, they would evacuate everyone, every intelligent species, every civilization, every trace of life, to new galaxies throughout the universe. The swarm could have the Milky Way, but they would find it empty. "It would mean abandoning our homes forever," Zekthar said. "But our people would live," Chen replied, "and maybe someday, when we're stronger and wiser, we can come back and reclaim what was ours." The evacuation expanded rapidly. Human ships with their dimensional technology could move entire populations in a single jump, but each portal opening brought them closer to total shield collapse. "We need more time," Dr. Namira reported as she coordinated refugee flows. "There are still over 2 billion people in the core systems." That's when the humans made their final sacrifice. The 50,000 volunteers who had stayed behind to operate the trap made a new choice. Instead of using the quantum devices to create a prison, they would use them to buy time. "We're going to destabilize local space-time," Admiral Webb announced. "Create a temporal distortion that will slow down the swarm's advance. It won't stop them, but it will give us a few more hours." "What will that do to you?" Sekthar asked, though he already knew the answer. "It will kill us," Webb said simply, "but it will save billions of others." The quantum devices activated with a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Reality twisted around Sanctuary Base Alpha as time itself began to stretch and compress. The swarm's advance slowed to a crawl, their movements becoming sluggish as temporal currents fought against them. But the humans operating the devices began to fade, their bodies unable to survive the dimensional stress. One by one, they gave their lives to maintain the temporal barrier. "Go," Commander Chen told Zekthar as her own form began to flicker. "Take your people and run. Make sure our sacrifice means something." The final evacuation was a race against time itself. As the temporal distortion weakened, the swarm began to break through with renewed fury. But by then, most of the galaxy's population had been moved to safety in distant star clusters. Zekthar was among the last to leave, staying until the final refugee ship had passed through the evacuation portals. As his own vessel prepared to jump to the Andromeda Galaxy, he watched the Milky Way begin its final transformation. The swarm poured through the weakening barriers like a black tide, consuming everything in its path. Stars went dark, planets dissolved into constituent atoms, and the very fabric of space-time was rewritten according to the swarm's alien geometry. But it was an empty victory. The galaxy they conquered held only ruins and memories. The people, the cultures, the dreams and hopes of billions of beings had all been moved beyond their reach. In the Andromeda Galaxy, the survivors began the long process of rebuilding. Humans emerged from their pocket dimensions to help establish new colonies. The Empire worked alongside former enemies to create a new civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. And everywhere, in schools and archives and memorial halls, they told the story of humanity's last message to the Galactic Empire, how a species had chosen to die as heroes rather than live as slaves, how they had turned their own extinction into a weapon against the darkness. Years later, as new generations grew up among the stars of Andromeda, they would look back toward the Milky Way and see only darkness where their ancestral home had been. But they also saw something else. Proof that even the greatest evil could be defeated if people were willing to sacrifice everything for each other. The swarm had won the galaxy, but they had lost the war. Life would go on, scattered across the universe like seeds on a cosmic wind. And someday, when enough time had passed and enough strength had been gathered, those seeds would grow into something the swarm had never faced before, a united galaxy that knew exactly what they were fighting against. The humans' last message had been received, understood, and obeyed. And in obeying it, the galaxy had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes running away is the bravest thing you can do. In the darkness between galaxies, ancient intelligence stirred with something that might have been frustration. The prey had escaped, scattered beyond easy reach. The hunt would continue, but it would be longer and harder than before. And in distant Andromeda, children of a dozen species played together under alien suns, never knowing how close they had come to never existing at all. Their laughter echoed across the cosmos, a sound of hope that even the swarm could not consume. The great exodus was complete. Life had found a way,